And with it, groups have come and gone. The tournament is actually halfway over. There's only 3 more weeks left. Woe shall what we do. That's not a sentence. Hi, this is Vision Denial. I'm Sam, and this is our Daily Sweepers, where I take some dramatic readings of the notes I wrote here for each of the games. A couple of things to note for today. Today's video is going to be longer because there were 9 games that happened today. In other news, on the bottom over here, I will be putting highlights, and as per usual, they are from the Vietnamese League, the VCS. Please do go check them out. They are fantastic. All worth the time. Really unfortunate we haven't had the chance to have them participate in the last 2 years, but you know, COVID. What else is there? Well, otherwise, it's if you enjoy these videos, leave a like and subscribe, and we'll just get right into it. Because first we got to start with Gen G versus Mad Lions. God, we're going to come full circle with this one. Wow. What an abrupt end to a game. There's a lot of good and a lot of bad happening here on both sides. Gen G on their end have fantastic wave manipulation, strong understanding of their wind conditions, incredible vision denial. And while their vision may be shallow, they have a clear grasp on how to provide misleading information for their leads. That said, they overestimate their ability to set up neutral plays and how good their engagement is, and on top of it all, being much slower or inefficient with their map movement or macro decisions. Oh, that's for Mad Lions, actually. I don't know why I wrote Gen there. That's a mistake on my end. See, this is why you read the notes dramatically. Gen G for real this time. Have incredible neutral setups, good understanding of their teamfight limits, great map movement, and solid vision. Even when Mad have denied it insistently. There are moments of hesitancy that lead Mad to turn around during different fights and flip neutrals or secure turrets when they literally should never have the opportunity to do so. And let's actually expand a little bit more on that. There's a theme that runs across a lot of these games during the group stage, and we'll focus still on Group D here, where like indecisiveness and not understanding if you're in the lead or not understanding what to do with a lead or how to come back from a deficit really hurt some of these teams on a large scale. And I think it's worse than teams who are proactive and are way behind or are behind in some way and try to do plays that are nowhere near efficient or proper. And Gen G had this situation where like they checked all the boxes that they needed to do, right? They have vision. It's not the best vision, but they also provide vision denial, so they have access to the information the entire time. They do everything to have proper wave, to have like solid wave manipulation. They do this neutral setups, all perfect, like easily one of the better teams in this world, of course, right? To be expected. But then they do nothing with it for large swaths of time. And part of it is usually the way that they draft, but I think also part of it has to do with I don't know. It's there's like a fear almost. There's like something that clearly happened between the first week and the second week of groups where a lot of these teams realize that they're incredibly close, much more than what was expected. And like I know that I have said it that this is the most competitive Worlds has ever looked, except for literally Unicorns of Love. But literally all of these teams are like within like margins of each other. Or like the gamut of the thing is like really hard to really easy, but the space between those is like really small across the board. Yeah, no, the competition is significantly closer than it has been in any of the Worlds. And the last time it was like even remotely this close was 2012. And so I think the teams are starting to hesitate a little bit more because they're afraid of overcommitting or creating a mistake that will cost them because the teams will capitalize it 100% of the time. So, now granted, when it mattered most, for this game specifically, it came down to a Baron play that Mad did for the second time and almost managed to pull it off. But since they were working off of vision denial only and not proper vision, the rest of their setup was fairly weak. Gen came in for a fairly simple steal and engaged on them. And with that, they had a clean ace and the game ended. And I think that the fact that they came in to engage properly shows that the game was slow as heck, and then they actually had an action. They actually were proactive with something and went for it. And then they win. Gen G wins and are 3-1, guaranteeing a tiebreaker no matter what, if it comes to it. And Mad go 1-3 and could still have a tiebreaker, but it's mostly out of their control at this point. Next, we have LNG Esports versus Team Liquid. Holy smokes, Team Liquid, what a statement to make. Let's start with LNG, who during the entirety of this game looked absolutely lost. Moments where they traded objectives were fine, but multiple solo kills, weird skirmishes, shallow vision, slow map movement, poor neutral contests, and overall, Team Liquid just outplaying them in every category. It makes it hard for me to even see what was going on with them, especially after such a strong start to groups and such a strong start coming in from play-ins. A lot of this just looked like as if they were not prepared to even leave play-ins. Now, and I don't mean that like this is two mediocre teams playing and then one just dropped the ball. LNG looked incredibly strong here. No. Team Liquid usually would be considered the mediocre team in this case, and yet had full, clean control during every second of the game. As opposed to the last game, the vision denial was backed by also super strong vision control. Much of the early leads and early neutrals were beautifully used to translate into leads for other lanes, which translated into added lane and wave pressure, which leads to team fights that LNG have no business trying to contest. And Alphari uses all of this after all of the 8K gold lead and pushes forward to finish the game. They even get a slight win. Right? The second LNG even get one small inkling of a win, Alfari literally looks into the distance and goes, "Ah, all of you came to fight us with an open nexus. Cool, I'm just gonna go that direction. Great." And sure, they stopped the soul, but neglected to protect their base and over-indexed into fighting to come back. LNG just seemed to not know how to respond to these kinds of aggression, since it didn't happen too much during their playoffs and play-ins coming in. But they kind of need to figure this out. There's like a whole lot to unpack regarding LNG's play during groups at this point, because it is feast or famine and no in between for this team. They will take a lead, grab the lead, go with it, and just assume that they're going to just win off of it, because teams will jump into them and they'll be like, "Oh, I'll take it as it is. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's great." But yeah, they need to learn how to figure out how to play from behind, because honestly, Gen G and Mad Lions are not going to allow them to replicate the scenario, and they'll be punished a lot like harsher. Team Liquid is honestly severely controlled in this case. There is just the ending of this game was the most proactive, and they were proactive during the entirety of this game, but this is the most aggressive, I would say they were, of the entire game, in a game where they were just like calm, cool, collected. Now, Team Liquid, I hope you keep this up. This was a fantastic play, and granted, a great show for your first game of the day. Team Liquid wins and are 2-2. LNG 2-2, and the 4-way tie meme is still possible. Did you guys feel that shiver? Next, we have Gen G versus LNG. Flame Horizon at 16 minutes. Yeah, this was a one-sided and embarrassingly so, in more than one way. Now, I got to commend Ale on being the reason they were so far ahead, and equally the reason they didn't close out the game to begin with. I really don't understand this. All right? There's something to be said about Gen G properly punishing when they did, despite the goal deficit, and that they even managed to grab a Baron. Because, like, LNG, seriously, from the looks of it, you just expect teams to make mistakes and for you to come into them and just lose. As far as I understand, this is your approach now. And I wish I caught this a lot sooner, going back from it, but I'm fairly certain all of their previous games did not have this issue at all. I'll probably look back at my notes from this, but like, this is a weird, bizarre way to approach Worlds, especially given the way that like you played the rest of play-ins. You played 4 games at play-ins and looked more proactive there than you have in groups for the entirety of groups. And I've mentioned it during like every playoff runs before going to an international tournament. Teams that expect mistakes to progress the game or to even as their win condition need to have a serious reevaluations, because that's not Worlds quality. LNG, you're showing no Worlds quality. You had a 10k gold lead nearing like this at the 16-minute mark. Or you had something ridiculous of that sort. And you still couldn't close out the game? It took you a long time to realize you could close out this game. Like too much. Now, once LNG realized they could just end the game with their wallets, they brute forced it and won. Now, it's hard to analyze anything else from this game, since like any player approach is usually influenced heavily by the wallet. And what we can usually analyze is how cleanly the winning game closes, which, like I mentioned, for LNG, it's not good. It's a little worrisome, actually, in the long run. And how the losing team reacts and finds advantages, which, for the most part, Gen G played this as well as they could given the scenario. The fact that they were allowed to grab a Baron, or that they were able even to make any contest or to like interrupt any momentum, is wild in its own prospect. Yikes. So, LNG wins and are 3-2. Gen G are also 3-2. And guys, the four-way tie is very likely possible. Did you feel that? Best to ignore it. Next, we have Mad Lions versus Team Liquid. So the four-way tie thing's a meme, right? It's a meme? Just a meme? What? Well, okay, here we go. Mad found some solid approaches to their win conditions during the early game to ensure their team fighting would be enabled in the later stage of the game. I think it's very difficult to look at this and see a team that invested in more than one condition as much as their vision was shallow, their neutral setups inconsistent, their contests were really hinging on team fights. However, Mad did hold on to the tempo at all times and properly assessed what they should be picking fights and avoiding any that aren't on their terms. Now, I realizing this now, this note is not super clear. What I'm saying is that it seems Mad Lion has indexed their drafting. What seems Mad Lions did index their drafting towards team fight centric mentality, which is the MO for Mad Lions. We expect them to team fight. It's not a complicated thought. The difference here is that it seems that any other type of win condition that they would have usually approached the game has been thrown out the window for fights exclusively and doing anything to be able to set up fights. And like I mentioned, they had proper pacing. And they kept control of the pace of the game solely around their fights and their ability to keep control of everything that's going on. But there's the big but. They did nothing else or it's not like they didn't do anything else. They just didn't do anything else properly to make sure to guarantee that they were going to solidify any of those leads in a concrete fashion. Now, Team Liquid on their part was very good at answering and slowing down Mad Lion's pace, creating picks, disrupting the waves, and having a better neutral setup in general gave a lot of wiggle room to answer or trade up any moves that Mad Lions had. That said, they did draft in a way that requires heavy leads early on and a focus on bot side play. And since that was avoided and not properly focused, any gold lead that was accrued by Mad Lions became much more effective, regardless of the kinds of answers that Team Liquid had. Now, you would think from the start of the way that I started this paragraph, that Team Liquid would have won. No. They just didn't in this case. Because it's really unfortunate because the lack of understanding of what their win conditions were really hurt them during this game. Because Mad Lions played to their win condition despite the worst setups, and Team Liquid leaned into trying to counter anything that Mad Lions was doing instead of reinforcing what their win conditions were. They didn't play to the bot side of the map at all. And so that just leaves me wondering, like, what's going on? Any contest that you were doing, Mad Lions was still going to get more gold out of it. And you didn't do anything to, like, improve your scenario. So, with that, Mad was able to win. And then they're 2-3. And Team Liquid are 2-3. So, that 4-way tie, eh? No, it can't be possible. No. Well, next we have Team Liquid versus Gen G. The 4-way tiebreaker looms ever so close. Yo, what a spicy game. Down 3,000 gold for the majority of that game. Team Liquid played fantastically around the vision. And they had perfect, and I repeat that, perfect neutral setups. Look back at this game. This is a masterclass on how to properly set up neutral objectives as a win condition. Like, the fact that they got all of the Drakes is frankly spectacular in this situation. They had no business being this good at setting up all of these Drakes. They got every Drake. They got an Elder and a Baron. They secured 7 of the 8 neutral objectives. They lost 1 Rift Herald that they opted out of super wisely because they were not in a position to properly fight or contest for it. Because guess what? This is how you properly set up for neutral objectives. I wish just every team going into the top 8, when it gets to the quarterfinal playoffs, every team adopts this kind of mentality when it comes into neutral objectives. Because they took what would have been an impossible situation beforehand, or a highly improbable situation beforehand, and turned it into a legitimate threat that Gen couldn't do anything with it. Now, Gen G, on their part, created a lot of solid picks, as well as a lot of really good engages in team fights that pushed Team Liquid to the limit. I mean, like that, and the combination of their laning, their map movement, and their wave manipulation meant that Team Liquid had to play on very thin margins for this entire game. I don't recommend pulling this approach off at a 3K deficit. It is not a good plan. Team Liquid, for the most part, played the rest of this game a little lackluster. Their laning phase was not great. I am not surprised by that situation. Unfortunately, their laning phase across the board is not as solid, but they're not also like severely behind from it. Despite that, the map movement and any particular picks or ganks or any early lead that was established by Gen G made this whole setup for them significantly harder, and any small mishap at any crucial moment of the game where there's like a reset or anything of that sort straight up would have lost Team Liquid the game, and the 4-way tie meme just dies with it. And they didn't. They kept to their guns, were incredibly methodical and patient. And they should be commended for that kind of shit. This was an incredible show of force from Team Liquid. The absolute gall and like resilience from it, it's great. I am a little worried though, mostly because like If Gen G was able to let this happen so frequently and let Team Liquid just take things as they wanted and weren't contesting vision or any other of the setups in any way, shape, or form, it feels really bizarre for this to happen. And Team Liquid, the fact that you are not on the ball for your early game play will hurt you later on down the line. With that, Team Liquid wins in our 3-3. And Gen G are also 3-3. They're both guaranteed a tiebreaker for the second seed of quarterfinals. But based on what I see for the next game, it's likely that we'll get a 4-way tie. Because we're going to get to see LNG versus Mad Lions. Oh, it's hilarious. All right. From the game, LNG have a hard time from playing behind. All right? This is a consistent issue at this point. The second they lose a significant lead, they become hesitant and reckless. Now, how do you do both? Well, you stop coordinating as a team, engage way too late, and become disjointed, and then choose to stay in moments that are just going to make you lose more. Now, Mad needs to come up with new ways to close out games and balloon their leads. Their vision was super lackluster. They made no effort to control neutrals in any particular meaningful way, often allowing LNG to stack Drakes and giving them an avenue to come back. And they were also often super sloppy with their engages. And there's something to be said about that, because, like, Matt, what I was referencing is that they need to find a new way to close out the game. But you can't rely on Baron all the time. It's not a good way to close out games. It hasn't been in a long time. But, like, it really baffles me that there is such a heavy reliance on team fighting for every single one of the compositions Mad Lions has. For people in the future, if you watch this, force them to play a poke composition and watch them fucking flail their arms around. Literally ban out and take away all of their engage. Now, where was I going? That said, solid wave manipulation and map movement always kept up the tempo of the pace, and it kept it in their control. Now, let's just say it usually was to be able to direct all of this particular advantages towards their win condition, which is team fighting. But they got to keep the control for when they wanted to fight. Now, Matt understood when they could close, but chose to be patient, opting to let LNG come in and make mistakes. And I think that's a little... what's the word I'm looking for? I feel like that was a little bizarre, given how much of a lead you had. Like, guys, those of you who have leads, you can end the game. Please don't come at me. There's a little bit more of an explanation. Those of you who have accrued so many of the resources and checkboxes for your win conditions need to reevaluate if you have put too many things in your win condition list that you require to go back in moments where closing out a game was significantly possible, or at least doing damage to their base would have been possible. Or if you're just not cut out for this. And it sounds rude as heck, but like you can't be just a team that allows the other team to grow and come back. That's how you get like 55-minute games of nonsense. Well, Mad wins and are 3-3. And then LNG are 3-3. It's the first ever 4-way tie! Which that means Team Liquid will face Gen G for a spot at quarters, and Mad will face LNG for another spot at quarters. And then winners are both seeding, and then the winners for both will just do a tiebreaker for the seeding. What the fuck is this timeline? So we're going to go to our first tiebreaker. It's the Gen G versus Team Liquid tiebreaker. I don't know why I'm sounding so goofy. So, close but no cigar. What could have gone wrong is usually just making one wrong move, and then the other team blows it up to no end. And honestly, I would have it no other way for a game. Team Liquid and Gen G went blow for blow during the first 15 minutes of this game. Vision, waves, neutrals, the whole shebang. All of the buzzwords I use, right? Just anything and everything that would have been the right steps to make during the first 15 minutes of the game. I would have it no other way. Both of these teams played it. Not perfectly, but darn near exactly how I would have hoped any of these teams to play if I was a coach for either one of them. That said, Team Liquid were starting to slack in terms of their vision play and opted into some poor map movement after the first Drake, and that allowed Gen G to garner a small lead, which they ballooned into the other lanes, which they used to bolster BDD, who then ended up taking 2 kills, sniping people off into darkness. And then it just made their picks easier and vision a lot harder for Team Liquid to approach. That's straight up just the hallmark of a solid team. When you have a lead, you keep up the pressure, and you take the steps to balloon the lead even further. And you make sure that your opponent can only make mistakes as any of their choices for them to come back. If the choices that they have to come back include not having to make a mistake or having to take a high-risk play, then they're doing it right. In this case, however, I would say this is honestly the most convincing thing that Gen G would have had to do to show that they deserve this win. Or deserve to get into quarters. Because this was an inconsistent team with lots of question marks, where it was uncertain how much of this was them just kind of showing up at the mid game and then just being really good at team fighting. Because again, all the teams in Worlds are good at team fighting, so it's not really a thing that you can work with. Or if at some point they were just going to be taking leads from really dumpstering early on during any given game. And the fact of the matter is that they played this game cleanly. They took advantages where they needed to take them. They blew it up as well as they could, and they remained proactive during the entire endeavor. So fantastic on them. Now, Team Liquid should be proud of the way they play during Worlds. Incredibly consistent out of them, and incredibly competitive with the rest of the teams that were in the groups. And it shows that they could have had so many different combinations of who they were in and had the same kind of performance. I'm 100% certain of this. The teams that they were facing off against were the best European team and a Gen G with question marks, but who were the most consistent team coming out of Korea during the entirety of like start to finish for the year. And so this result, despite the numbers being the exact same as last year, is not the same kind of comparable effect because they show that they were much more competitive this year than they were last. So buck up, you did good. With that, Gen G wins in our 4-3 and qualify for quarters in a tiebreaker for first place. And Team Liquid are 3-4 and are eliminated from groups and worlds despite a fantastic showing. And with that, there's only one team left. And we're going to find out for the next game is Mad Lions versus LNG. What is it I said, for the last game? It's a hallmark of a solid team when you have a lead and you keep the pressure up and you make sure your opponents can only make mistakes. Well, LNG sure has leads, fairly significant ones, created by mistakes by Mad. And then LNG plays a very passive set of games today. It's very telling when the team with the lead doesn't opt to play towards the side of the map with said lead. This led to a series of fights that happened over and over again that kept Mad coattailing and hanging on by a thread. Now, LNG does play with solid neutral setups and passable vision, but Mad finds last-minute fights to take huge leads, and then they work with those leads so that it balloons. Might I also say, both of the teams take very risky approaches towards their major neutral fights and how to close out their games. Situations that would have won some fights are instead causing huge throws and coin flip-like scenarios. Overall, though, not a very clean game. But it does leave me concerned with the way that Mad Lions is going to go in the best of 5. Because we're in a scenario where LNG had a huge lead, right? Mad Lions threw their early lead in a spectacular fashion, and they were mostly trying to fight it, to fight the lead as much as they can to come back into the game. And it concerns me because the hallmark of a great team is the team that the team that literally leans into the side of the map that wins is usually going to be the one that's going to win the whole thing. And then they'll use that to move on to other lanes and to create pressures across everywhere else. If Mad Lions was playing against, let's say for example, because we don't know at this point, we don't know if they're going to be facing off against any of the top teams. Actually, we do know, but for the sake of this argument, because of the notes, just if they face off against Damwon. Damwon's a bad example. Damwon's kicking everybody's butt. They're facing off against T1, right? When T1 has a lead, they are incredibly efficient at ballooning the lead and moving it forward at an incredibly fantastic pace. They wouldn't let you the opportunity to fight you on your terms to come back and coattail. You would have had to been strung along in a series of disappointing and often quite humiliating tower takes just over and over again as they also take in neutral objectives. Because the difference is that these teams are a lot more proactive, for lack of a better term here. They are much more efficient at garnering leads and using them to make more leads. They're better at accelerating the game. That's what it's. They're better at accelerating the game. And I feel like a lot of times they'll hit the mid-game point and then it'll drag. And it shouldn't. Mad wins and are 4-3 and qualify for quarters, and will face off against Gen G for the first seed tiebreaker. And LNG are 3-4 and eliminated from Worlds in a fashion that would leave many to be disappointed, especially on how incredibly solid they started their Worlds play-ins. The team they beat is in playoffs right now. It's gotta hurt, buddy. Well, that's what it is. Now that we have all of the teams that have qualified, now we just have to figure out who's in the seeding. Well, then who could that? We know what that is. You know, it's just Gen G versus Mad Lions. Oh man, today is wild. You know, as deciding games go, this is a really baffling game. Gen G often find themselves waiting and doing nothing during the late game. The leads of almost all of their advantages just accrued from the early and mid game, literally meaning nothing for the stakes of the game by the time that the fights are happening. So many of the fights, one after the other, decided on individual plays and mistakes, as opposed to like any coordination. These are the two teams we're sending to quarters from this group. After we just saw Team Liquid's performance? Huh? Like, I understand this is not going to be their go-to, but this is just like really bizarre. Mad fought tooth and nail and approached the game with much better wave manipulation and individual skirmishes, which is so baffling. Where did this come from all of a sudden? They didn't do it at all for almost all of the other games. Sure, map movement was fine, but like wave manipulation wasn't really their strongest suit. Now, Gen G had a better late game neutral setups and team fights from it, but like it took them till the late game to actually focus on the neutral objectives. Like, that's not a okay thing for that to happen. So many of this game was just back and forth, small trades, like consistently with kills and fighting, less about the turrets or the neutral objectives. And it led up to a huge Elder Drake fight for all the marbles. And it barely worked for either team. My brain is mush from this game. No, I can't. Like, I'm serious. I watched this game and went, the fuck is Gen G doing? Everybody would be like, oh, they have a long range engage. But, like, why are they just so hesitant to even engage in the first place? Why are they making so many egregious errors that have been unforced and never showed up during the entirety of group stage from this point? What is Mad Lions doing in this case? Why would they give up their fantastic wave and lane manipulation in the last 10 minutes of this game? They had level leads because of the way that they're approaching the waves fantastically. They had stopped any momentum at any given point just because of their lane assignments. And that's fantastic. I commend you guys. It's really good. But then when it came down to the whole thing, big shebangle, one Elder Drake fight done, and then they just die. And then the game's over. And I don't know how I feel about the way this game played out in general. And I think about what happens if you swap some of the teams in, and I don't think they would have done much better given the circumstances. Gen G had the lead almost the entire game and wound up doing very little proactivity with it up until it was the late game. Any other team would have taken that right there and been like, oh, time for us to turtle and come back. They're letting us turtle and come back. And Mad Lions, for the most part, pretty much did that. Genji, what do you have to say for yourself? Nothing? Oh, you already went to court. You're already at quarters. Well, considering this game didn't matter all too much other than for seeding, Genji won. And they ended up 5-4 and take first seed into quarters. And then Matt are 4-4 and take the second seed. So, my final thoughts. Well, given that, I'll probably talk about this also during our podcast. If we do end up doing one, we're likely going to do one because there's a fairly hefty break. Hefty for world standards. There's 3 days. Because the first one is going to be on Friday. This is the bracket that ended up coming up with it. Now, the first thing I want to mention is that literally we could. There is a chance for a Korea final. Totally doable. And it can be straight up a rematch of 2 other world finals. For those who don't know, Genji are previously of Samsung and then rebranded because I think Samsung couldn't own a team and do also brand stuff for a bunch of other teams. So T1 and Genji could make it to the finals, and it would be a three-peat rematch of Samsung versus a T1 team or SKT. Because yes. I also think that if you're a memer, you would love it to see Cloud9 versus Mad Lions in the grand finals. I think that would be really fun. Like a grand old time. Now, given the context of everything that we've seen in all the groups at this point, a couple of things that jump out to me are some of the history that comes up with a lot of these. Genji and Cloud9 already have a history in terms of Cloud9 shutting them down or being downright really competitive and annoying for them. Royal Never Give Up and Edward Gaming on a regular basis have had this issue where they meet up in the brackets on the best of 5 stage and Edward Gaming end up getting eliminated. T1 versus Homo Life. Well, I mean, this is a rematch of... I don't think this is a rematch of this year. I don't think they've actually done best of 5 against each other this year. I think this is just Chovy versus Faker, one of the 3 replacements for Faker and then himself. This is just going to be a Korea matchup. It's whatever. And then we have Damwon versus Mad Lions. And this is more to do with Mad Lions being the only European team left. They have a very hard, very difficult set of matchups to go up against. Now, on the off chance Homo Life wins against T1, that would, to me, give them an upper edge still, no matter what, if Mad Lions was to win. If Mad Lions even make it through. And given what we've seen from how they played today, and the utter inconsistent approach to this game that they had, by no means am I going to go, oh, shit, they have 0 chance. But the problem is that Damwon have such a consistent lock on how to approach visions, how to approach neutral objectives, how to approach their lane assignments and wave manipulations. That, comparing a team fighting team to the Damwon, who their bread and butter is team fighting, that's not a great move in any sense of the word. You're going to have to figure out an alternative to dealing with Damwon, who have already aced every other aspect of their game on top of team fighting being so solid. Now you would say, well, what happens if T1 goes? I'm like, if T1 goes, Homo Life is the least team fighty team of this bracket. If Team 1 goes, T1 is a better team fighter overall across the entirety of the LCK. Now, what brings them down is a lot of other inconsistent measures about their gameplay, including their drafting, which doesn't always enable their ability to team fight, but they will play a composition that is garbage at team fighting and out team fight you. Mad Lions cannot, on this side of the bracket, rely on team fighting to make it to finals, let alone semifinals. I do want to preface that I'm pretty sure the only teams that we have left here are Cloud9 and Mad Lions, that like the Vision Denial channel has agreed on getting their jerseys that they make it to the semis. I can literally confirm that very quickly if I just had a brain. Don't copyright. Eventually. It's almost there. Wow, I'm really not doing. Yeah, so we put in all of LCS, Fnatic, Mad, and PSG. Considering how there's no Fnatic, there's no PSG, the Mad Lions and Cloud9 are the only two teams that are left. Either of these teams making the semis will get their jerseys. Do I expect any of these two teams to make the semis? No. Straight up not. Okay, I've already explained the reason why Mad Lions is not going to go, and why I think it's probably going to be Damwon and T1 that are going to move on, and then it's just going to be a rematch of the Korean finals to go to the grand finals of Worlds. To be specific, Hanwha Life Esports have been an interesting team. Oh yeah, no, Hanwha Life and T1 did do a best of 5 for the regional finals. Hanwha Life did not do so hot. Again, for the aforementioned, all of the weaknesses that T1 has are usually worse or exacerbated on the side of Hanwha Life, and Hanwha Life will often try to create scenarios that T1 will just agree to fight because it's not a good idea to fight T1. Don't do that. Don't let T1 have any moment that they can team fight. Not a fun time. So, I'm expecting either T1 or Damwon to make it to the finals. I can't guarantee either or, because I'm pretty sure T1 has had a very positive upward trajectory and improvement as playoffs from spring and summer and then now have gone on. So that's just that side of the bracket. That's the side of the bracket that's like the bloodbath is what's going to happen. The side of the bracket up, I talked about the history about RNG versus EDG in terms of like Worlds, but honestly, this could go either way. RNG and EDG have been back and forth during the entire year, and despite the fact that RNG dropped the ball a little bit during the summer playoffs, during the regionals they showed that they had a better understanding of their win conditions, and I'm very excited to see this particular matchup. I'm also uncertain if they've actually played each other during any time. They didn't play against each other during the summer in terms of the best of 5s. I don't remember about spring, but that's like a while back. So I would say that, like, given the recency of things, RNG looks shaky, but not as shaky as EDG. And this is something that should be positive, because this allows them the chance to actually reevaluate and reapproach the way that they face off any given aspect of the gameplay. And I'm not gonna like go through the buzzwords and like who's better at what for like absolutely everything, other than like understanding that the weakest team in any of the aspects that is not team fighting is Mad Lions. And the team that is the weakest at team fighting right now, or is the most inconsistent at team fighting, is Cloud9. Because Cloud9 have their disconnect and their disjointed approach to things that Gen G are just going to like eat up for breakfast. Easy peasy. And unless they like show up in the same way that they showed up for the week 2 of play, I don't think they're going to get much. But, you know, best of 5 formats show a very different world and a different kind of approach to the meta that, like, a double round robin won't. And so, if I was to be by the books about things, I would say that given the results from groups, RNG would be go forward, then Gen.G, then T1, then Damwon. And then from that, I would expect Gen.G to go forward, and then Damwon. And then it'll just be a rematch of world. It'll not a rematch, but it'll be a world championship off, where two world champions face off against each other. That's my tentative predictions for the moment. I'll have a lot more time to think about it and to see what other people, like what my friends on the channel think. But that's my tentative thoughts on the matter, just briefly looking at it. But outside the bottom side of the bracket, the top side of the bracket could go any way. And heck, the bottom side of the bracket could go any way. No one's infallible. Damwon's the only one that's been the most dominant so far. I don't know. You guys let me know. What are your thoughts about this particular bracket? Do you like it? Do you think this is exciting? Or are you thinking some teams are already doomed, or this is just going to be one-sided? No. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And again, thank you everybody who watched the video. Really appreciate it. And like and subscribe to and all the all the YouTube buzzwords. And hopefully we'll have a Vision Denial episode up at some point. With that, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you then on Friday at least. Bye.